Macharia Munene is Professor of International Relations at the United States International University of Kenya and Associate Fellow, Horn Institute. He joins us now to speak about some of these issues. A very good evening to you, Professor, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let me just start with that last report that we had on the role of social media, particularly in elections. What are your views on its impact now for these elections in Kenya?
Thank you. The social media operation is increasing in importance. Each candidate pays a lot of attention to it. And so what we have now is competition among the bloggers and the communication experts, as they are sometimes referred to. Each group has a team of that. And their job is to make the other side look bad while they promote their own side. So a lot of things that are being said in the social media may be exaggerated, but the intent is to see whether they can persuade as many people as possible to join one side or the other. The problem is that whereas social media is spreading as an organ of disinformation, the reach may not be as high as some people would like. Or their assumption is that those who are involved in the social media do have their own little influences somewhere. They might be able to persuade some people to go one way or the other. And so people are bombarded with bits of information, some of it doctored to prepare for certain image. So it is growing in influence, but it is not a determinant.
And it's interesting that you say that it may be growing in influence, but not necessarily in impact. And I want to talk about it largely from the point of view of its role, social media, in democracy. There are those who say that it breaks down the monopoly that particularly the elite classes have on setting the agenda, because then it's a platform that is unpoliced, that dissent is openly available. But others have questioned the quality of the conversations and the arguments that are out there in really building up a credible democracy and societies.
Well, the social media have, in a way, democratized news dissemination. The days when the mainstream media were the only ones that people could rely on, even when they were wrong, those days are gone, because almost everybody now is a journalist of some sort, because you can always come up with a story and put it out there, and if it picks, then it becomes acceptable. So it is having that effect. As to whether it is improving democracy is another matter. When you have a series of disinformation and competing disinformation, trying to persuade or to mislead others, it's doubtful whether you can say that they're enhancing democracy. But at least the more people can participate in it. There are different sources of getting information from the mainstream ones. And there is a belief that the mainstream are controlled, so they are more elitist and have a serious agenda to promote. It is happening in Kenya right now, those kind of claims. And social media just opens up the space for spreading opinions. Whether they are valid or not is not the issue, but just spread and get people to talk about them. They're democratizing the opinion making rather than leaving it for a few people.
So we'll come back to the issue of voting patterns and what some have called exclusionary elite coalitions. But I want to go back to another report by one of our other colleagues on the issue of the role of observer missions and guidelines of free, fair and credible elections. Particularly, I mean, you heard one of the commentators there talk about that they believe that observer missions are there for a very limited amount of time, therefore the scope is skewed. But the truth of the matter is there are long-term observer missions, so they're able to get that perspective. But I also want to reflect on the role of the courts in a constitutional democracy like Kenya.
Well, the observer missions, actually it's kind of a new discipline that has cropped up in the last 20 or so years, that people are trained, sometimes trained to be professional observers. And what do they observe? They go there and see whether the people are voting, whether there is intimidation, whether there are unnecessary obstacles, and then they write their report to that effect. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. And depending on the perception of a particular time. The people who send the missions, the question that comes are what is their interest? Now, in the Kenyan situation, we know they are interested because Kenya is a pivotal country in the region, since it tends to influence the entire Eastern Africa and sometimes Eastern and Central Africa region. So whatever happens in Nairobi has effect somewhere else. And so the big corporate interests, the international interests, the big power interests, they are all interested to see that things do not go bad as far as they are concerned. So they send people there to go and see how things are going. And then say, yes, we think things went relatively well. Could have been better here and there, but they went well. Occasionally, they might say things were so bad that they cannot approve or give a positive report. And so you have sometimes this situation of trying to figure out what kind of report to give and why they are there. And so, yes, there are people who are hired or associated with the international observers, like the team that has come in to Kenya for the last few months, working with players, in particular the EU, and they are there.
Okay.
So the question is that they want.
So let's go back to the issue of the organization of the various political parties and the leaders behind it. There's a view that to prevent democratic stagnation and long-term disillusionment, particularly with electoral politics, especially among the youth, that it's critical to focus on the democratic performance and accountability beyond the polls, but of these parties as well. The fact that there hasn't been much of a shifting in terms of weakly institutionalized and exclusionary elite coalitions. Is that still persisting, the political interference in state institutions, the failure of electoral politics to deliver better governance, precisely because elite classes sort of pass on the baton to each other?
Well, there is that aspect of elitism. They are together all the time, except when they are looking for votes, then they make very strange statements. Sometimes, at present, one of the disillusioning factors is that there is a lot of insults on both sides, trying to discredit each other to the point where they make statements or promises that cannot be believed. And people, that in itself creates disillusionment, because people are asking, why are you lying? And that kind of thing. Now, there is also the issue of personalities. In particular this time, the two leading personalities, Raila Odinga and William Ruto, these are seasoned politicians. They are very strong, each in his own way, and they have a past record that may not be very nice to some people. And so they are the ones driving and their supporters driving the agenda. And when they are driving that agenda, sometimes it doesn't come out very well. So we do have a lot of disillusioned people, and there is growing apathy, very unfortunately. And that apathy might affect the turnout next week as to who votes or does not vote. That one is happening, and is a source of concern to many people. But the personalities is the key.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your insight. Professor Macharia Munene from Kenya on the latest in the lead up to the elections of the various dynamics at play.